Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another video from your favorite man-child, Super Jesus Jackson. Thanks for stopping by. So I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of trailers and a lot of marketing for this one little movie called Weapons. It's a horror film directed by the guy who did Barbarian. I can't recall his name, but he had some decent success with Barbarian, and he then made Weapons. And I didn't make a video on Barbarian because I thought the movie was kind of underwhelming. Nonetheless, I checked out Weapons because it got a lot of buzz. A lot of people liked it, and I like to go to the movies, so I checked out Weapons. And I was also underwhelmed. But this one in a more perhaps heartbreaking way. Mainly because this movie had a lot of potential. And it's something that I notice in some movies, not all, but in some of the recent horror movies, actually, that have gotten a lot of buzz, such as Weapons and even a movie like Together. I see some similarities here that really bother me. And it's because, not only have we had phenomenal horror movies earlier in the year that I don't think received as much praise as they should have, but it is also, I think, it's concerning to the studios, the people who have the money to fund, the next films of the next 5-10 years, the creatives, the way that what happens is when a movie comes out and it's successful, it basically sends out a message to, financiers, to studios, to heads, to producers, to creatives, and it tells them, this is what you have to do to make a movie successful. If you want your movie to be, if you want to pitch your movie and you want it to be greenlit and you want it to be financed, it has to be within this mold. It has to be like this. And this is what will get you, the billion dollar film and what will get your film greenlit. That's essentially what happens. There's a reason why the multiverse movies, specifically in the comic book genre, are huge. And they've been huge because it's been a proven way to make money and to get critical, success as well, such as No Way Home, for example. That was, a multiverse movie. Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was another movie that basically, I think it was interesting. It wasn't necessarily a comic book film, but borrowed a lot of elements from multiverse stories, and it was successful, right? And now you're getting Avengers Doomsday, which is basically, it's getting every goddamn, Marvel character, that from all these different eras, all together in one movie. Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. What's another movie that I literally just saw that was Deadpool and Wolverine? Like, all of these things happen and these movies come out, and if they do well, it tells others, it tells the studios, it tells creatives, this is the hip thing now. You have to do this, right? This is the trend. Such as movies that are basically banking off of nostalgia of 30, 40-year-old IPs. The Naked Gun, Twisters. What's another one? Freakier Friday or whatever. That's literally coming out or just come out. So this is what happens. And so with Weapons and Together having this massive success, way more, I think, than some of these other films, with the exception of Sinners. I made a video about Sinners. I really love Sinners. I think it's a phenomenal movie. It deserves all of its praise. That one's kind of an outlier. I mean, that one didn't make $1 billion. I don't think Weapons is going to make $1 billion. Thankfully, for a horror movie budget, Sinners did do really well. And I think Weapons, obviously, is going to do well as well. But other movies that I think should have just done much better, The Monkey, Companion, and Bring Her Back, dude. Bring Her Back. Oh, God, so good. But what is my problem with movies like Together, movies like Weapons? These movies don't take themselves seriously. They don't commit to themselves, okay? That's the biggest crime, I think, that happens. But apart from that, there are other aspects of it too that are just basic flaws. They're flaws that really should not happen at all. And it's just the logic of your story, the logic of your world. Because both of these movies, Weapons and Together, I came out of them like confused. I came out of them being like, I don't understand the logic. I don't know how this story ended the way that it ended. It didn't explain as much as it needed to. I thought it was inconsistent in its logic, in its story. And that's a problem, right? Just with those two movies. Now, that is not necessarily, something that will follow, that other movies will follow, hopefully not. But what I think other movies might follow, and what the next movies of the next 3 years might look like, is movies that don't take themselves seriously. Now, we've had plenty of movies like this already with Marvel, right? I think Marvel as well, that's another example of the Marvel Cinematic Universe heavily influenced everything. It's just heavily influenced so many. It's why we still have these goddamn superhero movies, is because everybody is trying to, emulate the MCU success, right? And so the Marvel formula is essentially create a movie that is successful in all four quadrants, right? Adults, older people, young people, families, women, men, like all these types of demographics, like be successful in all of those demographics, and your film will be $1 billion and it will be successful. And I think that's positive, right? There's nothing wrong with that, I guess, inherently, right? Who doesn't want to make $1 billion film? Who doesn't want to make a movie that's successful? But I think when you do that, when you go too far with that, you end up sacrificing, I think, the power of transcendent art, like actual art that does something. The Exorcist, for example, the classic 1970s horror film that was the first one to ever be nominated for an Academy Award. That movie was successful not because it was following a trend, not because it was, doing anything that was like, that movie was bizarre. That movie was like, it came out and it just befuddled people and it disturbed people. It did stuff. And now granted, there were some, horror movies that, I think The Omen, was around that time as well. And that one was a little bit controversial too. So, it might have followed a little bit of a trend, but overall, even when that movie came out, it was so, it was disturbing. It was traumatic, it did waves, right? It did waves. And it heavily influenced everything else, right? As it naturally will. And, that's how things happen, right? And to me, I think that was the right formula. It was a movie that I think valued its art, over any other type of superficial reason, or superficial element, And the thing with Weapons and even a movie like Together, is that they're not consistent. They're not focused. These movies have a ton of jokes, right? And look, humor and jokes is fine. You know what I mean? But the thing is that these movies don't know what they want to be. Like, for example, The Monkey, which is a movie that came out earlier this year. That movie is incredibly sarcastic, very, very, very funny. But it's consistent, and it's still very emotional and I'm still very invested in the film, even though it is hilarious and even though it's satirical. But it's because it has a very focused tone, a very, it is like a missile. It is just exact, in its mission. Longlegs. That's another movie that I just thought about that was it had a lot of good buzz. Did that movie come out this year or was that last year? I think it was last year, so don't count it. But, I think it was a recent horror movie that, everybody thought was like, the second coming of Jesus. And I went to go see it. And I wasn't a huge fan of it in terms of what it was trying to do, its story and everything. But I really, really appreciated the movie so much so that I even bought the film and I even want to watch it again at some point. The filmmaking was beautiful and I thought its tone was consistent. It was bizarre. It was weird, and it was consistent. And movies like Weapons and Together, it hurts me so much because they had so much potential. The premise of Together is phenomenal. The idea of these combining, like these bodies, joining together, like it is so cool. And for the first maybe hour, maybe 40 minutes of the movie, I was heavily invested. And then towards the very, third act of the movie, it just goes bonkers and it loses itself. It does not know where it wants to go. On top of that, you add confusing movie logic and an inconsistent narrative, and you get what you get. But people love that film, and I don't understand why. The Substance is a very similar film to Together, I think. But that film is a much better film because, again, it's more consistent and its logic is more consistent, And that movie had a bonkers third act as well. It just went heinous, just like crazy, went off the rails. But it was fine because the tone of the movie was following. It seemed like it was naturally going that way. And so that's a problem. Weapons, for example. And this one hurts a little bit more because this movie reminded me of like Hereditary. Like it is, the story is so, it's so sinister, it's so dark, it's very, very sad, very depressing. That's any good trait of horror. Any good horror movie is sad, has to be sad, right? And tragic. And this movie is that. And it could have been another Hereditary. That's what I was feeling. And Hereditary, mind you, I'm not a huge fan of Hereditary, but I'll give it props in that it's consistent and that it's powerful in what it's trying to do, right? And so I appreciate it. There's nothing wrong with it. This movie it seems like it tries to be the next Hereditary. It's got this, sort of conniving, older female grandma witch type of thing. And the story is very sad and it involves children and it's just the disappearance of children and horror and trauma. There's disturbing imagery, like there's all this stuff to it, but mixed in is silliness. It's bad timing of jokes. It's light at times, and it mixes its lightness with incredible depression, which can be done. It can be done in a way that's effective, but I think this movie doesn't know how to do it. It doesn't do it well, right? But again, I also think that even with what this movie is, I don't think it should have gone that route. I think it should have maintained a very consistent, very, serious tone, maybe some occasional lighthearted moments, but mostly I wish it was more serious. I wish it just went that route, or at least because the movie does have, it does that thing where it splits, the movie sort of into chapters, and we go into characters and different perspectives of characters throughout the film. And it's a very cool format. I really dug that. And maybe a couple characters could be purely humorous, but then other characters, nothing humorous happens in those parts. Just to give each character their dues, not every character has to have humor. You know what I mean? Like, and so that's sort of the thing. And specifically the third act of the movie, it just goes also like Together. I think it just totally, the actual climax of the film and the resolution it's not satisfying because it doesn't take itself seriously. And the logic of the movie doesn't make any sense. It doesn't explain it well at all, if there is any. So that's a problem. The theater that I was in, by the way, was having a hell of a time. Okay, I'm definitely in the minority here. I know that. So I hope that, when you listen to this video, you watch it, I hope that we can have a good, thoughtful discussion in the comment section. You don't just just come and like totally crap on me for just thinking differently. But everybody in my theater loved the film. They were having a wonderful time. And my girlfriend and I were just looking at each other and we're like, number one, why is this film trying to make us laugh when very disturbing, awful, tragic shit is going on? And number two, it's not even that funny. Some aspects are funny, for sure, but like, it's just not, it just feels weird. It's bizarre. And look, I am not a person where it's like, oh God, like you can't make fun of some things, like some things are off limits, like I'm not that person at all. Like I said, The Monkey, is an incredibly disturbing and tragic film that makes light of like very, very sad stuff, like just insane. But the way that it does that is just much better executed. And I find that I end up laughing and I end up having true emotion in that movie because it's the way that it does it is just way better than Weapons or Together. It's just really unfortunate because Weapons, I think, has fantastic cinematography. The music is great. I think the potential of its story is phenomenal. Performances are great, if I hadn't said that already. It just falls flat in its tone, and this is what I'm afraid of is that I hope, hopefully not, that these movies will influence other movies where it's like, oh, I can't make a movie like The Exorcist anymore. I can't make a movie like Hereditary anymore. Movie studios will be like, we can't fund movies like The Exorcist anymore, where they just go balls deep, double down on horror elements, and seriousness and drama. They can't do that because in order for the movie to be successful and financially successful, more importantly so, you can say it has to have drama, it has to have comedy, it has to have a little bit of action, it has to have everything, and it's just when you mix in all these things all together, and there's a way to do it, but for the most part, if you combine all those elements, it is very likely you can end up with something like Weapons, which, again, I'm in the minority, but you can end up with something that's inconsistent and does not. I end up feeling nothing. I don't end up really invested with anybody because the jokes and the tone of the film end up, and it's so conflicting because, again, there's so many. This movie has so many conflicting elements that there are points in the movie, specifically and probably in the third act of the movie, where I am really feeling it. I'm like, this is fucking awesome. This is great. And then it ends up it derails into this like, sequence of jokes and I lose it. I just can't do it. At the end of the day, it's not the formula, I guess, if you really want to say that, because again, there are some movies that do that and that do it well. But I find that sometimes that type of formula can be done, but it has to be done by someone with a very fine, a fine-tuned pen. You know what I mean? Like you have to. It has to be done by someone who can for sure handle it. Who knows how to do it right. When everybody tries to do it, not every movie is going to be a banger. They definitely won't. I'm willing to bet even the majority of them are not going to be bangers when everybody just tries to follow that formula. I think you have more success with a more consistent tone. And so it's a very tricky thing to do. It totally is, man. But some movies do it for sure. Forrest Gump, right? That's a movie it's a classic. It has all these elements: humor, drama, tragedy, a little bit of action for sure. But it's incredibly effective, right? And it still hits you in the feels. Weapons, though, didn't really do it for me, unfortunately. Didn't really do it. For this one, I thought it should have stayed consistent. Well, you know what? I feel like I perfectly sort of divided the video here. The very first half is very non-spoilery. The second half, I'll delve into a little bit of more spoiler territory. So if you've not seen these films, I would say wait to see them on streaming. I wouldn't say go to the theaters to watch them. But if you want to, go ahead and then come back to this video. I think the logic of Weapons is heavily flawed. I don't understand how at the very end of the film, I don't understand how how do these kids, slowly come back to real life? They were being heavily manipulated and they were puppeteered. And when the little boy broke the branch and all the little kids went after the ant, okay, that happens. But then what happens to the kids? Are they now beholden to the kid or how are they are they in limbo now? And if they're in limbo, why are they in limbo? Like, where does the source, where is the source of all this puppeteering? Like what element? We saw this like little, almost kind of like leaveless tree, is that sort of the thing? Like, there's no explanation to this stuff. And, like his parents don't come back. His parents like stay in this sort of catatonic state. What happens to them? How are these kids slowly starting to talk again? Just how does this stuff happen? There's so much, there's no logic in there. And again, this is all very incredibly depressing stuff. And at the very end of the film, you have this incredibly, it was intentionally supposed to be funny. These kids, just like, it's that thing where guys like these kids are chasing, throughout this neighborhood, this old aunt. And, there's a guy with a lawnmower and he turns to the kids, to this other lawn. The grandma's running, and then there's silence. And then the kids, run, and it's supposed to be humorous, right? And then they go through all these houses and shit. They're breaking stuff, and these kids are going through windows and walls, and it's like, it's just doesn't make any sense because they're kids. And they go and basically just dismember this aunt, which is hilarious. So you have all that, but like it just kills the stakes of the movie to me. It really did. This movie again was setting up this, especially the first like 10, 15 minutes of the film were like super serious, very, very dramatic. I thought the cinematography was beautiful, seeing the kids, sort of run out of the houses and the music and everything. It was very eerie. And I thought it was going to be like another Seven, another Hereditary. I was like, this is awesome. And then you go to the very end of the film and, throughout all these jokes throughout the film. And then again, the very comedic sequence at the end, it just all falls flat to me. It just doesn't, it really doesn't. And how I mentioned that the movie was sort of broken up in chapters. The little boy, his part of the movie was the best part because there was actual seriousness in that part. There was, it took itself seriously. It's very sad. It's very effective. And there's not a lot of funny shit in it, like at all. Like it's very sad, serious stuff. And that's when the movie's most effective. Even Josh Brolin's character, occasionally there was some humor in there when it's like that he is incredibly sad and he's going through a lot, having lost his son here. And his character even is a very kind of serious guy, like it just doesn't make any sense for him to have some humor. And that's the thing, is you need to have somebody who understands character, you know what I mean? And not just insert jokes to everybody, and so the movie just fell flat to me, and the logic didn't make any sense to me there. So that's what it is. If anybody has an explanation down in the comment section below, let me know. I was not following this movie. I think just didn't even do a good job with it explaining or validating its own story, which is a problem, let alone all the other tonal things that I had a problem with. But it just hurts so much because it had so much potential. It really did. And it's that thing where, like, sometimes my girlfriend and I have started implementing this thing where we leave the theater. Like if the movie is not good within 40 to 30 minutes, like we leave the theater, or an hour if the movie's like 2 hours or something. And like we walked out of Megalopolis, we walked out of Mickey 17, like it was that bad. And with this movie though, it's unfortunate because it almost hurts more that I wasted my time with this movie because I didn't end up feeling satisfied. Because the movie had good enough elements for me to stay through the whole movie, but I ended up feeling I felt like my time was still wasted. And that almost hurts most. I would rather, almost go and watch Megalopolis because at least that's consistently bad, or you can have a drink and have fun with that movie. It's like a Batman and Robin type of film. But this movie, it's like, I can't because there's such good elements sometimes, and then sometimes it's not, and it falls flat, and you end up just, it's like these occasional breadcrumbs that are laid, and you're like, okay, well, there's a piece of bread, and then there's no piece of bread for a bit, but that there will be a piece of bread at some point, and so you keep following until you hit your head and you fucking go unconscious or something. Like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. Together, same thing. I had the same problem. It just derails at the very end of the movie with this like terrible music, sequence. And the characters' decisions don't make any sense towards the third act of the film. And then it just goes bizarre. And then the very end of the movie is not explained in terms of the logic of it. Like, why did they become, one, and like, why are they now an androgynous figure? Like when like the earlier couple that we saw in the cave, they were like disfigured and shit like that. And if it, and they were a monstrosity. And if it was truly about, the only way that two people can combine and become one is when they truly love each other. Like, if that's the case, then why wasn't it said explicitly? And like, it didn't make any sense, like, I just, it just didn't explain it, and it's like the couple that disappeared and were in the cave, and the monstrous couple, did they not love each other fully? And is that why? But also like, it doesn't make any sense, on top of, again, the inconsistent tone. And that one was another one where I stayed through the whole thing because it was compelling enough for me to watch it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Weapons and Together, these recent horror films that have gotten a lot of traction, a lot of buzz, mainly Weapons though. And how I'm a little concerned with, hopefully we don't get more horror movies like this. But that's my opinion. That is my opinion. Unless you're going to be like The Substance or The Monkey, then yeah, let's do it. Let's have some more of those. But I wouldn't mind getting some more Hereditary in there, some more Long Legs. But hey, we did get some earlier in the year, such as Sinners, Bring Her Back, Companion. These are phenomenal films. I just wish those movies had a little bit more success. It feels like Weapons has a little bit more buzz than Sinners. Obviously because it came out a little bit later in the year. So I don't know what happens, but I hope the right movies influence, Hollywood and creatives, and not these movies. But that's my opinion. That is my opinion. I'd love to know your opinion in the comment section below. What did you think of Weapons and Together? Were you heavily moved by them? Do you heavily disagree with me? Do you think that they made sense? Did you like the tone? Did you like to have a laugh from time to time? Or do you prefer your movies a little bit more serious, like The Exorcist, or like Sinners, or Long Legs, or Bring Her Back, or whatever you want? Let's talk about it. Let's have a good, thoughtful, constructive discussion in the comment section. Give this video a like if you liked, dislike it if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this content. Share with your movie-loving, horror-loving friends if you will. If it's your birthday, happy birthday to you, you beautiful creature. But I think that's it for me. You all take care, stay safe, and until next time, I love you.